Welcome back to the void. If you're watching this and going, Lizzie, that's the same background and same jumper and same mug as your last video, that's because I'm batch filming. I'm filming this on the 1st of April and I have my March wrap up to share with you. It is a long one, so we're going to try and, get through them super quick. I read 16 books in March, which is so many. But really good books. I did have a few DNFs, which I won't talk about here because I tend not to review DNFs, but I might make a video about them another day. And so there were no really bad books. Everything was 3 stars or up, because I just DNF'd the ones I wasn't enjoying. It was the Tropical Readathon as well, which I love. The Tropical Readathon. It happens twice a year and I join in every time, and I have done for the last couple of years. And yeah, all these were picked because they fit a prompt and or were shoehorned into prompts because I had to read them this month. So without any further ado, let's get to the books. So we're starting off with my 3-star books, and the first one is Assimilation, and I'm going to try to get this author's name right first time, by Sophie Bouchard. I think it's French, I think that is how you say it. Please do correct me if I'm wrong. This is a multi-generational story, but mostly focuses on a mother and daughter. The mother is from Morocco, but grows up in France, and the daughter from France, but moves to the UK, specifically to Wales, specifically literally like 3 streets that way, in the early 2000s, which is why I picked this up, is because it was set so close to where I live. It had some really interesting themes about sort of belonging and citizenship and that sense of nationality and where home is, and it just really sort of shone a light on the questions surrounding immigration, which is obviously a hot topic in politics in all sorts of countries at the moment, and this the book invites us to take a step back and be like, let's be rational about this for a second. I really enjoyed the chapters about Marianne, who is the mother. The chapters on Charlotte, I enjoyed the Cardiff element. I thought her first person perspective I wasn't too keen on. It still felt quite sort of detached, and I think if it's first person you want to have that insight into the character. I think it's really hard to, and when it's done well it's really good, but it's really hard to get that kind of detached, unreliable narrator in first person. Whereas I did enjoy the third person things more, but the end really kind of tied it all together really nicely. Accidentally carrying on with the Welsh theme, the next one is Anthracite by Matt Thomas. So one of the prompts for the Tropical Readathon was a cover by, and I was literally sat there going, are there any books on my shelf where I just saw the cover and went, yes, I have to buy that? And this is one of them. Can you blame me? Can you blame me with this cover? It had to be done. This is a cyberpunk sci-fi story that imagines an alternate universe where Swansea is the superpower of the world, the mega power, and Welsh culture has become the sort of the basic ubiquitous culture that is everywhere. And there were some really just hilarious references. I really liked the way that little bits of Welsh culture were just thrown in there, that the top news outlets in the world were like CNN and S4C, which was brilliant. They would be drinking like leek daiquiris, and Tom Jones is like the ultimate singer of all time. Even little things like Wham singing Wake Me Up Before You Go Go Gawk, stuff like that. Just loads of funny little twists that were really, really entertaining. As is often the way with comedy sci-fi, the plot sort of suffered, I think, because of the comedy aspect. And as it got on, it got a bit old in the second half. And there were also some outdated words that I did not think needed to be in here. But it was an entertaining look into what life might be like if Wales ran the world. Next up is Escaping Mr. Rochester by L.L. McKinney, and as you can guess from the title, this is a sort of twist on Jane Eyre, an alternate universe Jane Eyre, where Jane Eyre and Bertha Mason fall in love and escape Mr. Rochester together. I had the best time reading this. It was so much fun. I could not put it down. I just absolutely devoured it. And then I got to the end and I was like, oh, that's it. I wanted so much more. I really liked that it lent into the fact that Mr. Rochester is clearly a villain. Why isn't this discussed more? He's clearly a villain. And that this book really embraced that, which I really liked. The romance was a little bit insta-lovey for me, not gonna lie. It just sort of, it was really sweet and I did enjoy it. But I did get to the end and felt like there was so many more things I wanted exploring. I would have loved an epilogue to kind of show what happened to Jane and Bertha after they escaped. There were so many themes that could have been explored. And it's just so much more. I felt like there was so much untapped potential, which was so frustrating because I loved reading it so much. If you just want a little escape, it is an escape, this book. You can just open it and devour it in a few hours. It was really fun and I highly recommend it for that. Still in the 3-star zone, the next one is The Porcelain Moon by Jamie Chang. Now this is one where I gave it 3 stars because it was a very good book that just personally did not connect with me at all. I don't know what it was. I just couldn't really get into it. I couldn't really enjoy it. But I thought it was still a very good book. That it was still well written. There wasn't anything not to like about it. So it got 3 stars from me. And this is set in the First World War and follows 2 women. One is of Chinese ancestry. I think she was born in China and their family moved to France. And the other one is a French woman who falls in love with the brother of the first woman. And they both want to escape / need to escape their circumstances, and they strike up a friendship and really help each other and support each other. So it was a really lovely story for that and really kind of shone a light on the history of, in this case, Chinese workers, but just generally non-European workers during the First World War, because there were so many of them and they have been very deliberately written out of the history books. And so this book is sort of starting to rectify that, which I thought was really good and a good reason to tell this story. Moving up in the 3 stars now to the top couple, and the first one is The Home I Found With You by Skye Kilane, and this is a sci-fi sort of future post-apocalyptic story set just after the second US Civil War, so it's sort of near-ish future, and it's a polyamorous romance. So the main romance is between 2 men, one of whom is also in a sort of different relationship with a woman, and I thought it worked really well for that like post-apocalyptic sci-fi setting, that the polyamorous perspective was just kind of part of how people live their lives, is that they built different connections with different people. The actual main romance, I wasn't completely sold on, gonna be honest. There were some things I was like, it just, some of it felt a little bit sort of, I don't know how to describe it. Some of it I was like, I don't know if that makes sense to me. But I still really enjoyed it, and the apocalyptic aspect was really sort of vivid and it really took you to that place. And the final 3-star book, right at the top, almost at 4 stars, is Daniel Deconstructed by James Ramos. So Daniel is a teenager in high school. He is autistic, but he has not told any of his friends that he is autistic. And he thinks his best friend Mona and their new classmate Gabe should get together. He's trying to set them up, and it's not quite as simple as that. People's feelings aren't quite what he had expected. It was just a really sweet story, quite straightforward, that just sort of took you through this little evolving romance and situationship and friendship between the 3 of them and how those dynamics shifted. It was just very sweet. A lovely little story. I whizzed through it. Really nice story with really good representation for queer characters, including non-binary and the asexual spectrum, and also an autistic character at the centre. We're moving up into the 4-star books now, and the first one is The Jinn's Apple by Jamila Morani, and this has been translated from Arabic, I believe. It's set in the golden age of Baghdad, and the main character, she sees all of her family be murdered in front of her, and she sets out to get revenge on them. It was a really short book, less than 200 pages, 160 pages I think. I whizzed through it in one sitting. Really kind of powerful story about our limitations and revenge, and also has some sort of little fantastical twists to it. And yeah, just a fun, well, not really fun, because it was, you know, there was murder, but sort of fun story. A really engrossing mystery story with a historical setting. The next 4-star one is Second Star to the Left by Megan Van Dyke, and this is, as you can guess from the title, a little twist on Peter Pan. So it's romantasy, which it's not usually my jam. Fantasy romance, yeah, not my go-to genre. I loved the fantasy. I didn't like the romance, so that fits pretty well. And so it's Tinkerbell and Captain Hook. You heard me right. I just had to like keep reminding myself, imagine once upon a time, and then it made more sense. The romance. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I say I didn't like the romance. I liked it. We thought it worked well between the characters. I thought their romantic arc worked well. Some of the scenes made me be like, oh no. Maybe it's just been too long since I've read any straight romance. I actually don't know. But yeah, it was really fun. It had a really nice kind of fantasy adventure to it. They have to team up to break a curse, and Blackbird was there, and it was great fun. I had a blast. Next in the 4-star books is Amongst Our Weapons by Ben Aranovich. Now this is one of the few series that I read. I'm not a series gal. And this is one of the few that I'm sort of keeping up with. I say keeping up with, this book came out 2 years ago, but I finally read it. So this is the 9th book, I believe, in the Rivers of London series. It's a crime procedural of the like magical department of the Met Police. It's such a great series. It's so much fun. And this was a great instalment. I had a great time. Yeah. It was so much fun. Loved it. And then my top 4-star book for March was Relit, which is a short story collection edited by Sandra Proudman. And this book is a collection of remixes of classic and well-known stories that all have a Latinx protagonist. And it was so much fun. They were all sci-fi and fantasy as well. It started off really strong with a sci-fi spaceship Pride and Prejudice story, which of course I loved. Other favourites for me included Evermore, which is based on The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe, and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. It had a slightly... hang on, is that right? I'll check. 20,000 Leagues Away From Me, because 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea is the original book. I keep getting this mixed up. So yeah, loads of really fun stories here. Obviously, I do have my favourites, but there were no bad ones. There was nothing that made me be like, oh, that one was okay. They were all really, really good. Lots of really fun twists, really creative stories. And yeah, I just really enjoyed it. It was a great read. We have made it to the 5-star zone. There are a lot of 5-star books to talk about. And the first one is The Butterflies of Meadow Hill Manor by Stephanie Parks. Now, this is a middle grade fantasy set in Derbyshire, which is one of my favourite places in the whole wide world, which is why I said that I would review this book. And I'm so glad I did. It was so good. So the main character is a young girl called Amy who goes to live with her aunt in her big manor house in Derbyshire, and things are not all that they seem. There are some mysterious noises in this house, and Amy is recovering from a bereavement in her family, a tragic loss that she has been through that has affected her, and she's sort of healing from that trauma, and the things she finds in this house help her recover from the trauma, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful book. That it has sort of whimsy and joy and sadness and hope and despair, and just really, really nice story. Really, really great. Carrying on with 5 stars, we have Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. This is a classic science fiction novel, and so the main character, Dana, keeps finding herself pulled back in time, and she's pulled back in time every time one of her ancestors is about to die. She has to save his life. And it sort of starts off in modern day from when the book was written, so the late 1970s. And she's a black woman who is taken back to a white slave-owning ancestor. And so there's a lot of... It's about sort of, being taken into that world and seeing the horrors that her ancestors are going through and that her ancestor is inflicting upon others. And it was just such... it was a dark read, gripping, and really sort of powerful in the story that it told. There's a reason it's a classic. I already had a few other of her books on my shelf, but I have since picked up some more, which I am hoping to get to soon because it was such a good book. Really, really highly recommend. Really recommend. The next one is Ryan and Avery by David Levithan. This is only my second David Levithan book, and I need to read more of his books because I've loved both of his books that I've read, and they're so creative and think outside the box in the way that he tells stories. And so this one is a romance between 2 boys, Ryan and Avery, and it's told out of order. So it's their first 10 dates, but we start at their 5th date, and then we kind of work outwards. So when 5th, 6th, 4th, 7th, 3rd, 8th, 2nd, 9th, 1st, 10th, like that. Which was such a good way to kind of unpeel the layers of their relationship and the story. And there's very sort of intense teenage first love and the queer solidarity with each other. Some really difficult topics that were not solved beautifully and tied up with a bow because real life is not like that. And yeah, it was just really, really lovely read with great queer representation and especially trans representation. It was, yeah, I loved it so much. I need to read more of his books. Next up is a non-fiction book, and it's a memoir, and it's called A Bookshop of One's Own by Jane Cholmondeley. And so Jane was one of the founders and owners of Silver Moon Bookshop, which was a women's bookshop in London from, I think it was the 1980s to 2001, I think they closed, or 2002. And I had never heard of this bookshop before I came across this book. And I wish I'd been able to go. It sounds amazing. And what I really thought was what really stuck out to me, well, many things really stuck out to me. She did not shy away from the mistakes and from the difficulties and from when they got things wrong. And one of the things she talks about when sort of setting up the bookshop is the tensions between running a business in a capitalist society and trying to run a business in a radical and feminist way, and all of those different ideas that were sort of bouncing around in the second wave feminism movement. It also really made me reflect on a lot of the things that we talk about today and how small they seem compared to what was being discussed in those years. And in some ways that's a good thing because it means we can worry about the small things, and being able to worry about the small things is in its own way a privilege, but also how many big things are we losing sight of because we're arguing about the small things. So that was sort of something that I was thinking about reading this book. And yeah, lots of really interesting themes and ideas that she sort of talks about in section 28, for instance, and how that affected the bookshop and the people who were living through that time. It was such an engaging read as well, and really sort of transported me back to that time. I really recommend this for anyone who wants to widen their knowledge of feminist history, of queer history, of British social history, of book selling history, all sorts. It was really, really great. The next one of my 5-star books to talk about is If You Still Recognise Me by Cynthia So. This is a young adult book, and the main character, Elsie, she is a British girl whose parents are from Hong Kong, and she is just embarking on the long summer. So in the UK, usually our summer holidays when you're in school are about 6 weeks, but when you leave secondary school and you're about to go to university, you have like a 4-month summer holiday, and she cannot wait. She's got plans, she's got all these big plans with her friends, and things take a turn. Things don't work out the way that she wants them to, but it takes her on a whole new turn. She's reunited with an old friend, she makes some new friends, she makes some new family connections, and it was just beautifully written, so poignant and so moving, and you really got that sense of when you're 18 and you're out in the world for the first time and you're figuring things out, and really explored ideas of intersectionality in a really good and interesting way. I just had a great time. I really, really recommend it. It was one of those audiobooks I was constantly like finding time to listen to it. I was like, oh, I'm going in the car for 5 minutes, so I'm going to put the audiobook on. It was one of those. So yeah, it was really great. And finally, the best book that I read in March, and I don't think this will be much of a surprise to anyone, it was The Pairing by Casey McQuiston, which I got off NetGalley. The noise I made when I got that approval. Casey McQuiston obviously wrote Red, White and Royal Blue and One Last Stop, and this is their new book, and it's about 2 exes who bump into each other on the same European food and wine tour and decide to be messy together across Europe, and it was just so wonderful, and I was so gripped. Amy, my partner, will be able to confirm that I was like this with my Kindle, and I'd be like, this is happening now, oh no, this has just happened, this has happened. I was keeping her updated every step of the way, which I don't think she wanted. I just loved it. The characters were, I just want to like protect them and sit them down and be like, are you okay? But they really both went on a journey of growth, and I love that. It was so great. It was so great. It was so great. It was like a rom-com, like a big old school like Richard Curtis rom-com, but with all of the characters and world and humour that we know and love from Casey McQuiston. It was great. And that's it. Those are all the books I read in March. Let me know in the comments what you read in March. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time. Ta-ra for now.